GM. I'm having some problems with how bright it is in the UK. Can you believe it? I've got a blind that arrived that I need to pull down. I think it's even got our logo on it, so I'll be able to pull that down in the future and finally get the old school brothel curtain out of the way for once. But yeah, today we have, as some might remember, I think it was our first investment with the Ethereum strategy. In fact, I stumbled across it before the staking platform was out, and I think I saw a huge asteroid bought by YGG, and then I bought tons, and I bought asteroid face as the first one. I also then went on to do Shiba face for the Shiboshis as well. So seems to be a running theme here. But yeah, we have got John Paul and Chris with us from Influence.
Hello, how are you?
There we go. Oh, you're gonna have to step to the side a little bit with the.
there we go.
He's in. How are you guys?
The two monitor problem. I always have to figure out where I am. But yeah, good morning. Well, I guess it's afternoon for you.
Yeah.
Whereabouts are you guys?
Well, I'm in Seattle, so it's 7 a.m. right now for me, and then Chris is on the East Coast area.
It's a very reasonable 10 a.m. here.
Fair enough. So you got the short straw then.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's all right. I pretty much am wired to be working at 7 a.m. so that Chris can ping me before noon for him.
Fair enough. For those who don't know, Influence, after the brief little intro, it'd be great to hear it from you guys yourselves, and also a bit of background how you came into the space, gaming or blockchain gaming in particular.
Sure. Yeah. So I first got into the gaming space a long time ago, at least as a player of games. Most relevant to Influence was my time spent playing EVE Online about a decade ago now, actually over a decade ago now. I was one of the founding members of Test Alliance, which was and still is, I think, the second largest alliance in EVE. And I helped manage that alliance for about 2.5 years before ultimately, I think, growing out of the time requirement for EVE, which was pretty extensive. But it's always stuck in my mind. It was, I think, a game that did a lot of really incredible things really well. They built this persistent universe, single shard universe where everybody played in the same instance effectively. And it really encouraged a large number of people to play together to accomplish kind of like big strategic goals. Test Alliance, for example, was generally between 5,000 and 10,000 actual people. And so it was pretty exciting to kind of accomplish things together with that scale. And so, fast forward to 2016, 2017, I kind of, happened upon the Ethereum white paper and website, and it kind of blew my mind. I started realizing that this idea I had a long time for a game that could ultimately be owned and operated by players and the community was starting to become possibly more realistic. And so I played with Ethereum for on and off for a few years, learned Solidity, built a few projects that never really saw the light of day. But then in 2021, really kind of in earnest started working full time on Influence. We had a couple of NFT sales, asteroids and crewmates in 2021, which Dom was part of. And fast forward to 2023, and we're working towards launching the first fully playable release of Influence.
Good stuff. I'll let you jump in yourself, John.
Yeah. So Chris and I actually met on Reddit. He had posted something about the game, and I just thought it was really cool. I had been into blockchain since about 2016, lifelong gamer, MMO player, and we just started talking, and I was like, yeah, this sounds fantastic. We should definitely do it. And so we started working together for a few months before we pushed anything public. And then at that time, we really just kind of, launched Influence into the public domain. But, I'd been kind of looking at trying to get into this industry for quite a while, both gaming and blockchain. So it was just kind of a perfect marrying of right place, right time, right idea. And, it's been just a ton of fun since. I think I will say that if you like easy jobs that are plentiful and lots of gamers and everything, Web3 gaming still isn't that. We've got a lot of work to do, but I mean, it's extremely rewarding, and I'm really happy to be here because I think that ultimately what we're doing is creating not just a new gaming industry. Web3 gaming is a term that's used pretty often, but I think game is a new model of game. And I think that's just something that's really, really rewarding and also very challenging to, work on.
And real quick, just to expand on that, I should probably mention a little bit about Influence in the setting. I mean, Influence is, like I mentioned about Eve being a single persistent universe. It's the same with Influence. It's a single star system, alien star system, not little green men alien, just not solar system. It's called Adelia, and it's made up of these 250,000 asteroids. They all vary in size, they vary in shape, they vary in resource composition, and they vary in their orbits, which are actually impactful. These all orbit in real time, so you have this kind of constantly changing strategic landscape, and all of it is on chain. So the entirety of the game mechanics are settled on chain, and so this is sort of our vision for a game that can ultimately live forever and be unstoppable. If it's everything settling on chain, it can be client agnostic. Anybody can interact with it. You can build external tools. You can build a third-party client. It's kind of like a huge world of possibilities. And I think that that's really exciting for Web3, for just a new genre of games that really couldn't exist before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned before about sort of when gaming sort of came about, and we're quite lucky in the fact that sort of blockchain gaming with a lot of ways to go, and then it got, as everything always does, for example, 2017 when the whole market got ahead of itself and the sort of value took over the actual utility and proposition yet. It hadn't been developed enough for blockchain, and so we had a similar thing with gaming and the trends that tend to go in crypto. So gaming, then we had metaverse, and then luckily we've had one take over from gaming, which is now everyone's favorite, AI, which so at least everyone's going to get sick of AI soon, and they're going to come back, and they're going to not, that's going to be the sour taste. I always mention it about tons of VCs who it's never their own fault that they did a bad investment in gaming. It's always the sector. Because everyone, just whenever you have these new trends, and Axie drove it for gaming, everyone FOMOs in, including VCs. They're as bad as retail, and then it's always the sector's fault. It's never actually their own bad decision. So luckily, we now have AI to take that mantle from us.
I do think so. I think in fairness, though, I think some of those bubbles are useful. Obviously, a lot of the projects will kind of disappear in the interim and never be heard of again. But it does funnel capital to new sectors, I think, that can be effective. And if you're patient enough and you wait through the couple of years when that hype goes away, I think we will start to see this year some pretty exciting projects that are coming out, hopefully including our own.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I always say that you have to go through all of the hardships to get to the good stuff. It's with everything, whether it's the bull market, the bear market. There's good and bad both in the bull market too. It's you have these expectations you have to live up to as well during a bull market that in a bear market just kind of go away. But if we're looking at the game as a game, we're we've never Chris and I weren't all right, it's a bull market, let's do this. Like we just like, it was the time that the game was being built, and that was kind of it. But you know, if we were to go back and turn the dial, I think both of us probably would have thought that like maybe the technology stack that we were building on would be a little bit further along than where it is right now. But again, like how do you predict that? You know, it's really difficult. So it also takes a lot of time and energy to build a proper game. And so like the scope of our game is expanded from what we originally, you know, had kind of thought in our head would be the first release. Now the same mechanics and everything are within that first release, but like the quality of game, we just want to ship something better. And it's actually allowed us to align properly with kind of that timing of the tech stack. You know, it takes a while to catch up, but we're getting there, and it's really, really exciting. I mean, I think it's still buried within like the people who follow tech, but like layer 2 scaling is like a massive thing that like people aren't going to realize how awesome it is until it's like at their door, you know, at their doorstep saying hello. It's coming fast.
I said this to had Michael Wagner from Star Atlas on a few episodes back. I said that with any sort of tech, it's like I think we got onto like the Avatar movie for some reason, and how it's developed for so long that by the time it gets around to like being released, like half the technology has been, you know, upgraded. And that's always a problem with technology, is that everything gets 10 times like better within such a small space of time that you're constantly always updates to do. Even with VEMP, we don't have a very high visual game out at present. But even then, like even like websites, like I think we should be releasing our staking platform like maybe the 4th update to it, and every time we're already working on the next one. Like honestly, it's just everything. It's always a constant upgrades, and you always having to reinvest. But I mean, how do you finish the perfect like user interface?
Yeah, I mean, you never will.
Yeah, well, I guess there's nostalgia. I mean, even like, for example, like Pokemon or like RuneScape or like Zelda, or these classics, you have the classic game modes that people go back to because they remember them, but the actual new games coming out are very, very different graphics. So there's I guess, time and place to revisit. But God, can you imagine like what the classics will look like in 50 years?
Yeah, really. Almost
like,
really.
Photorealistic, especially with like Unreal Engine and everything. But how is the alpha going before we move on to the question on the screen, which is when token?
Yeah, so I saw the earlier question as well, and yeah, we are actually currently in the middle of and have 3 days remaining in our 3rd public test, which is incentivized with Sway, which is the in-game currency for influence. And this is really, you know, it's the grease in the influence economy, not intended as a speculative token. It's really the unit of exchange that is present to allow for people in game to trade their resources, to trade ships, to trade their the advanced materials that they build on the asteroids. And so we've been running since the 25th for this 3rd testnet phase. It's been going really well. We still have availability of Sway as incentive, and there's still plenty to do. So I'd encourage anybody who wants to go check that out. I'll leave it to JP to let everybody know the best place for that.
I'll just hop in really quick and talk a little bit more about that. I think anyone who has already tried out our testnet understands like this is not the full game. There are playable features and it's fun to play around with, but there are still some like, you know, challenges in learning the game. Like that's the beauty of these things, is you actually get to start learning how to play the game even without the full feature set. But there's also a learning curve to like getting in and figuring it out if you've never used a Web3 wallet or account, whatever it might be. I think most people here in your community probably have already used, a Bravos or Arginex or whatever might be wallet, but we actually have a really, really cool feature or partner cartridge who has essentially allowed us to enable some really, really like high-tech new features within blockchain thanks to something called account abstraction. So we can use something called a session key. So when you get in, you confirm your session with cartridge, and you no longer have to do that terrible UX of double confirming every single action you take on blockchain. If you're used to it in DeFi and stuff like that, you go to Uniswap, you confirm something, and then your wallet pops up again, and you hit confirm again. When it's a financial product, you're like, oh, it's safety, it's secure. I'm having to double confirm, like, hooray. But in a game, that's terrible. Like, no one, like, imagine playing a first-person shooter and every bullet that you shot had to, like, do you want to shoot that bullet? Like that, it doesn't make any sense. So we've been kind of pushing forward with that tech stack and making our games a lot more seamless and enjoyable to play with this. So, I think as far as the testnet goes, it's fun. Please go ahead and try it out. You can earn some sway. And then, you'll start to learn the features and be able to be introduced to some of this new technology that's really, really cool. If you do want to do that, I highly recommend joining our Discord. There's guides, there's videos, there's support, all that in there. And you'll be able to really, be able to navigate the project a lot easier if you're in there. But if you don't want to join another Discord, because I know all of you guys probably are in 1,000 Discords like I am, you can just hop onto our wiki or website or our Substack, and all the information can be found there too.
Certainly a very in-depth wiki, I have to say.
It's a complex game by design.
Yeah, well, it was big when I saw it. Literally, I can't remember when, but I can't imagine what it is now. When I first saw it in 2021, it was very in depth. So I can imagine, only imagine what it's like. Now.
I will say we've been very, very fortunate to have been able to attract several of former CCP Games UX designer, a 3D developer, who bring that experience from Eve, and have also kind of wanted to sort of explicitly stated that they want to bring a better UX, a better UI to a complicated game like Eve Online, like Influence. And so I think we've been really fortunate to have a great UX team that has really pushed the UI, I think, to the point where it does take a very complex game and simplify it, provide kind of clear direction and clear feedback to the player as to what they can do, and what the impact of those actions will be. I think that they've done a really good job of kind of boiling that down and making it both an attractive interface and a very usable one.
Does Sway, is Sway an acronym?
It's a forced acronym. We backfilled it. So we kind of came up with the name and then presented it to the community, and said, does anybody want to develop an acronym for that? And they jumped all over it. So I think it ended up being the standard weighted Adalian yield. So Adalia is our system. So it's sort of playing on the idea that it kind of represents a small piece of the overall resource yield of the system.
Fair enough. And you guys are on Starknet, if I remember correctly.
We are. So JP mentioned a little bit about account abstraction. That's one of the really great things that being on Starknet has provided kind of from day one. Arginx is Argent's Starknet wallet. We've got Cartridge, who we're partnering with, who is taking advantage of that account abstraction as well. And actually, those session keys that JP mentioned was actually an idea that we first had in 2021, and talked with some of the other Starknet games like Loot Realms, Dope Wars, a few others, and ended up getting with the Argent team to start building that out. And now there is support for this concept within Arginx, as well as with the cartridge. And it's a really, really cool idea. I mean, it's like this concept that just like you'll log in sometimes with Google and they'll say, an app will say, can we have permission to get your name and maybe connection to your calendar or something, and you approve that. And now that app is able to take advantage. This is a very similar concept in that we're saying, hey, the game client wants to be able to submit this set of transactions for you on your behalf. And so we kind of communicate like, hey, these are simple game actions. It's things like building an extractor on the surface of your asteroid or transferring some raw materials between two warehouses, not things that are going to cost you a whole lot of money. There's not a huge risk there. So give us permission, we'll do them for you. And when I say for you, you keep custody of all your keys, but it's just the client, the game client itself. So you're, within your computer that's actually submitting that transaction without asking you to sign it again. We're not asking you to give us permission to transfer valuable NFTs or Ether or anything like that. But it really does increase the, I think the ease of onboarding and just the ease of playing the game. So I'm really excited to have access to that account abstraction. StarkNet is nearing the point where they'll be coming out of alpha. So currently their mainnet deploy has been around since I think late 2021 in alpha. And they're getting to the point where they're going to be rolling out of alpha pretty soon here onto their Cairo 1.0, which is their version of Solidity.
ZK? Do I swear I hear them a lot with like ZK rollups? Are they doing a ZK rollup? Or
they are, yeah. So they're actually Starks are a type of zero knowledge rollup which they invented. The group that basically their core group, the co-founders, as well as some of the really early employees, were the creators of Starks. And you may have heard other zero knowledge proofs like Snarks or Plonks or the other various ridiculous names for them. They're the inventors of this specific type and have built this entire architecture around it. So you may not, if you're watching, be familiar with StarkNet, but you've probably heard of Immutable X. You've probably heard of DYDX. Potentially you've heard of Sorare. Those are all apps that are running today on Starkware technology called StarkX, which is sort of like a permissioned version of StarkNet. StarkNet is the general L2 rollup, zero knowledge rollup that settles on Ethereum. So we originally deployed on Ethereum, as you know, and now we're about to be deploying a bridge that will allow you to get to StarkNet, the Ethereum L2, and play there. Obviously at much reduced gas costs, which is the entire intent.
Fair enough. And when I mentioned earlier, it might be a they who cannot be named moment. Do you consider like other space MMOs like Star Atlas to be in competition? I know that obviously, crypto gaming is huge, but is that is there an element of
Chris, you want me to take this one?
I mean, I'm happy to. I think there's maybe a bit of light competition in the space, but to be honest with you, I think that while it's large, it still pales in comparison to gaming as a whole, where there are 3 billion plus gamers in the world. And I feel like we're still very much at the point where supporting each other is far more valuable than competing. So I feel generally just a lot of strong camaraderie with everybody in the space, everybody in Web3 gaming. Yes, we're on a very wide spectrum of how on-chain we are, what Web3 actually means. But I think we're all trying to do things that are pushing the boundary in gaming and trying to take advantage of all the really cool things that blockchain bring us. So the more people who hear about that, the better. I don't think we're at all at the point where we've saturated the market. We need to start competing for players.
Fair enough. I'm not sure if this is something that you can answer or not. I think you're the coder, Chris. Do you know the answer to this? Because I certainly don't.
The difference between Starks and Snarks. That's a very in-depth answer that I will try and grab a link for and share on YouTube in the comments. I think it will do much more justice to that comparison than I will, just ad hoc here. There are a few, at least for us, there are a few trade-offs that are maybe a little bit more digestible. Starks typically will require and want to have more transactions per proof. but ultimately they scale better from a cost and speed point of view. You can put more transactions in a single proof and end up getting a higher per proof, per transaction speed. But in general, they're trying to accomplish similar things. Maybe one thing that could be of interest is the way that the cryptography is initially determined. In the case of Starks, it doesn't require a permissioned setup, whereas Snarks do. Although I know there has been research from the ZK Sync team on how to remove that permissions. So anyways, I'll send over a link that gives a lot more details on this if you're interested in digging into the technicals more.
Fair enough. See, if someone asked me that question of what's the difference between Starks and Snarks, I wouldn't know if there was like some sort of joke I wasn't getting, or like what the punchline was.
One has a T and one has an N.
Well, that is also true. Here we are. We got another question from Harvey. Will there be guild mechanics? If so, how will that work? Like any scholarship program?
I'm happy to hop in here, Chris, and I'll take this. So at our first release of the game, this is called our exploitation release. This is kind of the main container that will have the full economy. You can build things on asteroids. You can travel in a ship. You can build marketplaces, trade, and have fun. Now that will have chat on these asteroids, so you can chat with people. But as for if you think about World of Warcraft and you just create an alliance in a game, that's a really powerful tool, and we agree that this should be there. I think bigger question here is because we are a fully on-chain game, and there's going to be a lot of interoperability in the future between games within the Web3 space, that a tool for alliances should exist kind of above gaming so that it can feed into many games. So you could have a V Empire, alliance, but you're playing 5 different games. And the permissions in that are very unique in that you probably want to give permission to some players with certain assets and others not. So yes, alliances are important, and we're working with a few people that are kind of working on the idea, but the main one is called Guildly. We're talking to them pretty regularly to figure out how to properly integrate that whenever they are ready. And so Guildly will essentially be that alliance creator. You can create a guild just like you were in, World of Warcraft, except for there's going to be very granular permissions that you can set across many games that you play with people. So I guess long answer short is Influence isn't directly supporting it at launch, but we will have partners and people that we've been talking to that are working on that solution that you can utilize with Influence.
And are you guys planning on integrating Oculus or any sort of VR, or is that something at a later stage potentially?
I mean, I'd love to stare at my asteroids and everything with VR, but I'll let Chris talk more about the technicals on that.
It's on the list, but we're not working on it yet.
Fair enough. And there's another question on ZK for you here. Do you think zero knowledge is a natural progression for blockchain tech? In your opinions, will chains that don't adopt it become obsolete?
I think yes to both. I think it is pretty explicitly part of Ethereum's core roadmap. The foundation and the core devs have generally agreed on. Ultimately, a ZK EVM will come to Ethereum one day down the line. And I think that it brings so many incredible advantages. You even see, like with Optimism's Bedrock upgrade, building a composable stack for L2s. They're clearly thinking about, as ZK rollups mature, how can we basically pull a piece of ZK into Optimism? So yeah, I think ultimately ZK rollups will replace optimistic rollups. In some cases, it's clear how that happens because they're deployed as a ZK rollup. In some cases, with Optimism and Arbitrum, I think that we will see them sort of evolve into it. We also see like Polygon playing around with a lot of different types of zero knowledge rollups and zero knowledge chains. Some being privacy focused, some being more typical ZK rollup focused. So yeah, I do think that that's where the space is moving in general. You can kind of see a future where you get the benefit of using ZK proofs, which gives you this kind of somewhat unexpected benefit where the more transactions you have, the cheaper they are. Just kind of turns the current model on its head, and is obviously a huge advantage. And taking advantage of zero knowledge proofs to actually bring real privacy to blockchain transactions. So I think that those are both huge fixes for some of the drawbacks that are today pretty inherent in blockchain technology.
One thing I just want to follow up, because I think we can get lost in the tech all day, but how that can apply to the game pretty easily is that with ZK, knowledge is that if, let's say, you're shooting when we release Conflict eventually, and you're battling other ships, or you're firing off rounds to destroy some surface buildings on an asteroid. Right now, without ZK, you'd basically be able to front run transactions. You could see what people are doing on chain, and then you could just crank up your gas to get in front of them and be able to kind of counter actions before they actually happen. Which kind of breaks a lot of games, and so it's almost required that we use this technology so that you can have some privacy when you're competing against each other in terms of like conflict type games. So it's actually really fun when you think about it. Like it just increases the ability for you to just play a game, but it also is fully on chain still. So something we haven't really talked about is what we like to call, and what our company is called, unstoppable games. So like this game will be fully on chain, and therefore kind of live on forever. This game, God forbid, but like if the whole team was in a plane and we all went down in a fiery blaze of glory, whatever you want to call it, like as long as all the contracts were on chain, the community could pick up the game and continue to play it. Whereas this is not the same case as if you're playing traditional games and it's all being run in like an AWS server, and you're not paying your AWS, bill, and all the IP rights are wrapped up into that, then the game just goes down forever. I mean, there's a lot of games that I used to play that you literally just can't play anymore. And so that was kind of the intent behind Unstoppable Games, building influence, is that like we can eventually decentralize this game enough where people can run nodes of it. And then it becomes kind of like a peer-to-peer network, similar to, I don't want to say the Pirate Bay because that has a negative connotation, but like they've been successful in keeping their site up peer-to-peer for 20 years now, or whatever it is. It's similar to that, in that we can just eventually have a game that the community both plays, owns, and operates. And I think that's a really unique and very interesting model to build a game on top of.
Yeah, I didn't think about that side of it, as in it's one of those where it'd be a lovely problem to have, where you've blockchain gaming gets to the point where it is getting such a competitive angle that people are the same way that they're using like front run bots on buying tokens, or on certain wallets, that they're utilizing that in gaming as well. I'm not sure if it's been demonstrated yet on chain, anything like that, but I presume it hasn't really got to that level. But yeah, one of those good problems to have, but conscious to not to make sure that we're getting back onto influence and not taking advantage of your ZK knowledge. What are some of the long and short term goals, and is there anything coming out recently that's particularly worth noting, or particularly exciting, or whether you're excited about for holders and the community?
So I think large scale, we're looking at 3 major releases. The first one is called Exploitation, and it's coming this year, and that focuses primarily on extracting resources from the asteroids, moving on to your asteroids, building up through the production chain, building the buildings you need, the refineries, factories, shipyards that you need to actually produce ships, food, building materials, and then kind of just expanding those networks until the end products are readily producible, until you're able to produce ships to sell on the market, until you're able to produce building materials so that anybody else can get started. that's really like the primary focus of our first release. The second release is called Discovery. The goal here is kind of to get, as the belt fills up, starting to add in the technology component, the skills component, the invention component, so that we can kind of expand the set of content. You can get more advanced extractors, you can get larger warehouses, more advanced ships with more space that can move faster through the belt. And really the idea there is we start to sort of scale vertically in the belt. So now, a single lot on an asteroid can become more productive. And then as the belt is getting tighter and tighter and there's less and less space, it's becoming more and more limited. Obviously, that should lead ultimately to conflict, which is the name of our third release, which will then allow you to start to fight over control of the asteroids and the lots on the asteroids. So that's kind of the large, longer term arc. Right now, as we mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of our third of 4 public tests. So we will have one more public test coming. This public test was focused primarily on scanning your asteroid for resources, sampling it to figure out where the best deposits are, extracting them, storing the goods in a warehouse. The next release is going to add basically all of the remaining functionality for exploitation. So it's going to have the full production chain. You're going to be able to build refineries, habitats, shipyards, marketplaces, spaceports. You'll be able to buy ships, build ships, move between asteroids, trade between asteroids, build every building that's available in the game. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting. And that's effectively the last step. So we're going to do that public test, refine, and then launch.
And then we can go back to Harvey's question here about when token, or what's the plan in terms of obviously I know that you're incentivizing it, but there'll come a time where it becomes tradable on the open market. Are you planning on just adding that no sort of event, any sort of liquidity sale, any launch pad, or any thoughts at all?
So we're still working on it. What I can say is that at launch, at exploitation launch, there have been a few pieces of the Sway initial supply that we have talked about, and that we have talked about how they will be allocated. The Sway will be claimable and usable on day one at launch. We've been working on and are actually in the process of working on the direct Sway sale piece, and how players who maybe don't have an asteroid or don't want one, or never were part of the earlier sales that included some Sway allocation, how they would get it. And that's a pretty active conversation right now. But certainly, at the latest, that will be available at launch of exploitation, and will then be available to trade on the open market.
Good stuff.
Although again, Sway's intent is not to be that that value accruing governance token type that you see around. It is really intended to grow with the community, to try and grow with the player base, and be more of a unit of exchange that you feel a little bit more comfortable actually spending.
We get it, utility token. All right.
Yeah.
I think there's big danger in that, and we saw this, of course, with Axie, but there's also danger in it being in it having too low of a supply, going up too much in value, and people just not wanting to spend it. And at that point, like, we start to cripple the in-game economy. I think that's pretty antithetical to our goal in really providing a token that's going to help people trade in the belt.
Yeah, and I just want to add too, is like, I think, and I use this term loosely, but like the true value for players, like me playing World of Warcraft for many years, is your character, your items, your loot, and in Influence, it's like building your empire. It's your extractors, it's your refineries, it's your asteroids, it's all this stuff. So what you're using Sway for really is that utility. You're spending it to build your empire, and the really cool thing I think about these types of games is that you have that ability so naturally to kind of, trade, sell, buy your assets. So, if you want to buy more crewmates or more extractors, or you want to sell them to others, like all that's so natural in and kind of out of game. And so, I think like Chris, had said earlier, Sway is that lubricant to allow the means of trade between players. But I think the thing here is, all of that's in like sunk into your land and infrastructure. And so, what I'm really excited about is like years from now, maybe seeing like a big headline from the community being like, Alliance such and such like sells like all property and blah, blah, blah for such and such price. Like that is really cool. That's a catchy headline. Like someone saying, I sold some Sway, like, sure, it's going to happen. But like the powerful, I think, messaging behind like a utility token is like seeing people being able to like create these giant like monstrous empires in game, and then seeing how they start to like circulate through the economy. We see it in our everyday world all the time. We've got commercial real estate on every block that's either vacant or rented out. You hear big companies buy these huge monstrosity like pieces of land so they can build their HQ. Like all this, I think, is going to happen inside of Influence, and that's what I'm most excited about, is seeing like these alliances form and these empires being built, and solo players like really pushing themselves to see like what they can do. Like my goal, and when we first launched the sale of April 2021, I literally tried to find like what I would consider the worst asteroid in game. And like, I just want to see if I can build my tiny little space empire on this asteroid and just try and survive. Essentially, I'm at like the worst inclination. Like I've got like, I don't want to get into the details of orbital mechanics right now, but like, I think that's what I'm most excited about. And all of that, again, kind of leads back to Sway, because without it, you're in a barter and trade economy. And that's why we don't use seashells or like, I have chicken, you have rock, like types of economies now. It's just too difficult. So you need a token.
Bottle caps, like Fallout.
Yeah.
Gotta love that. But yeah, for anyone who hasn't asked a question yet, in the comments, do let us know whilst we still have the guys here. You guys have got a very strong Discord and a community. Not to blow smoke up your ass too much, John Paul, as a head of community, but do you want to speak a bit on the importance of that, on how you nurture that, just for anyone wondering on sort of how they can expand their reach or jump in themselves?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a few ways to look at community, and there's also like different goals to have at different stages of your project. I think Influence has done a really good job, and Chris is included in this community building, is that like we've really pushed the game first. And I think that's been really important to build kind of a very strong foundation of like core community. I think if we had gone forward with what you saw, a lot of different projects, not just games, but just projects in blockchain in general, being like token hype, like you saw those projects in the middle of the bull market do really well. They got lots of money, but since like how many of them have just disappeared into nothingness? They weren't really building for long term. And so Influence has always looked at our community as something that we want to foster and like, nourish for the long term, and have those people from that start out just curious about the game become like extremely, hardcore avid players. And you don't really do that if you're just hyping a token or whatever else. And so I think, from that, what we've already seen a lot of success. Like, sure, our community isn't massive, but we've already hired our technical game designer from within our community. So like we're finding people in our community that are so well fit that we can literally get them into the team on like not just a basic, maybe a community manager type position, but like technical game designer. That's pretty cool. And we're, hoping to keep building that community so that we continue to have people from within the community get hired onto the actual team, and that you see alliances form from, friendships that are made. I think it's all about like putting information that players actually are going to care about, and try and like build with them as much as you can. So, we continue to push information to them regularly in bi-weekly AMAs. We showcase like what we're working on. We do these test events that everyone has access to. And you know, yeah, it's great to give rewards and things like that. So like if you're starting out a community, you know that those people are going to have to wait the longest to play your game. And so, you know, reward those people the best you can, but also understand that in order to have a community thrive long term, it can't all be about kind of your early supporters. And I think that's also something, a trap that a lot of blockchain projects get caught up in, is that you have this small group of people who purchased assets in the very beginning, and those are the only ones that kind of you think about from then on. I think you have to be careful. You want to reward people adequately for what they've kind of, you know, participated in, but you also need to create a foundation that anyone can get involved in. And otherwise it just kind of becomes like a clique. You know, we've all been in high school before, and there were the cool kids. We don't necessarily want that in our community. So, you know, I think that's kind of the general summary there, but I'm happy to take more pointed questions if you have any.
Good stuff. Well, that's everything in the comment section. Thanks so much for joining. Always loved the project. Always been with the project from I won't say day one, but pretty close anyway. I'm not sure I count as an OG, maybe just an O or a G. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, guys.
For having us.
Everybody, very much encourage you to jump into the Discord and to follow. You know, I think some of the smaller asteroids you can pick up. I haven't looked at the floor price recently, but I think they're very decent value. And yeah, if you want a bit of alpha on which ones are the best orbits, types, sort of materials that can be mined, jump in. There's a very extensive wiki, I can tell you that. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. And yeah, look forward to following and having the last few days of the alpha ongoing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Nice one. See you later, guys.
Yeah.
Take care.